Which all-inclusive resorts have the worst dining, service, and just overall lowest ratings on TripAdvisor? Let's find out. Hi everyone, Vanessa here, and welcome to Passport Pages. And today we have a bit of a different take. Instead of me reviewing all-inclusive resorts, we're going to take a look at what TripAdvisor says about their lowest rated all-inclusive properties. But don't worry, we're going to be adding my own in-depth info and personal opinions, and be sure to check out our Passport Pages travel Instagram for different reviews and takes. I never advise that you use the opinion of a single source, but a compilation of many. And who knows, maybe while watching today's video, you may say, the heck with TripAdvisor, Vanessa, that resort's for me. That's a great hidden gem. Crazier things have happened, right? So let's jump in and find out. Starting with the least bad and working our way up to the worst, we'll begin with Breeze's Bahamas, and with 11,000 reviews, comes in with a score of 3.9. And the reviews are pretty yikes, with some saying it's the worst vacation they ever had, the rooms smell, and it's super old and outdated, while others even cite false advertising due to amenities like the hot tub, pickleball courts, and even lounger cushions not being available for use, making guests feel both very deceived and bored during their stay. And another guest stayed during spring break and said it was overrun with college students, not surprising due to the extremely low rates, and that they were given the wrong room at check-in as they paid for an ocean view and were given garden view. And this guest was told it was based upon availability. So some pretty big claims here, no question, and the frustration is understandable. I will say the reviews have greatly improved over the past couple of months, so allow me to give a more complete picture of the property, and you guys can decide if it's worth a try or not. So it sits with direct access to Cable Beach, and the only thing within walking distance is the golf course, which is a 5-minute walk. Downtown NASA is a 15-minute drive, and you'll immediately notice it's a very bland property from the lobby to the 391 guest rooms. There's no real local flavor or authentic touches, and the rooms are, no question, very outdated, especially those curtains. However, if you plan to spend most of your time on the beach and the room doesn't matter as much, I wouldn't necessarily call them a deal breaker. Outside, they have 3 pools and the hot tub that was mentioned earlier. The biggest pool does have a swim-up bar with submerged seating, and as I said earlier, you also have direct beach access, and one of the perks of the property being somewhat isolated is that the beach is pretty empty, so if that's a draw for you, here you go. But the dining isn't really anything worth mentioning. So, I'd say if you're on a super tight budget of less than $100 a night and neither room or dining quality or staying busy on vacation really matters to you, then maybe ignore the naysayers and try it. But if those things do matter, I'd listen to the TripAdvisor reviews and steer clear. Also coming in with a TripAdvisor score of 3.9 from over 7,000 reviews, we have Hotel Flamingo Cancun all-inclusive. Some common complaints were the staff and service, leaving a lot to be desired, with one guest complaining, quote, "They are not friendly and still want a tip." Another saying to straight up avoid a stay here and you get what you pay for. And they also mentioned the miserable staff, yikes. And another even saying, be prepared to be disappointed, and that meals were always chaotic and busy and facilities are all outdated. I will say this is another property that in recent weeks has 5-star reviews across the board, which of course caught my attention. But every single one mentions staff members by name, which, a little tip, when you see reviews like that, not just on TripAdvisor, but dining reviews, apartments, you name it, staff is probably coercing the customer to do so, and I just ignore those reviews. Not that they may not be positive reviews for this resort, but I wouldn't pay much attention to the ones who mention staff by name, and that was like all the recent 5-star reviews. So my personal take, if a great location in the hotel zone is a priority for you, it sits across the street from Flamingo Mall and is walking distance to dining and shopping and in front of a bus stop, then this is a very affordable option for you. Plus, the beach is very nice and spacious, great stretch of sand with beautiful water, but there's no question the property is older and dated, especially the 260 rooms, plus dining is very busy and frankly not worth the wait, although you do have plenty of dining options within walking distance. So kind of a mixed bag. Let me know your thoughts. You might be surprised by this next one, Hotel Riu Palace Paradise Island, with a TripAdvisor score of only 3.8. And this is not a cheap property, you guys. Some recent TripAdvisor reviews cite that, quote, customer service ranged from indifferent to downright rude, with eye rolls to boot, and that the food, especially in the buffet, was a letdown with cold, repetitive, and bland options. Another guest called it the worst Riu ever and said that there was no maid service for 2 days, floors were dirty, trash was overflowing, and they didn't have towels. And this is another property where a guest felt that they misrepresented, and after booking a sea view terrace room, they only got views of rooftops and a parking lot, and were told you get what you pay for. Now, as I've said many times, Riu properties are very hit or miss. They have some great ones and some pretty bad ones. So here's my take. It's one of the only all-inclusives in the Bahamas, especially on Paradise Island. It actually sits right next to the Atlantis Beach Tower, so a pretty great location. But unfortunately, that's kind of where the pros end. While it has a great beach, it gets very crowded, making it hard to enjoy, especially with all the vendors that roam the beach. And the property itself gets very loud. Lots of music and noise all the time, especially at the pool. Some would consider it a party property. And in addition to the food quality that the TripAdvisor reviews addressed, the lines for the dining options tend to be long, so you're waiting a while to eat. But in my opinion, the biggest issue, which I have to agree with that second review, is the lack of maintenance. Upkeep is just not good. Now, if you're just looking to be practically on Atlantis property and want to save a bit of cash and prefer an all-inclusive option, maybe you can overlook these things. A lot of guests do and think that that benefit outweighs all the many negatives. But otherwise, I'd steer well clear. Now we're starting to get into the worst of the worst with Divi Karina Bay All-Inclusive Resort and Casino, which also has a TripAdvisor score of 3.8. Now, this is another brand that has some very good options, especially their all-inclusive in Aruba, but this isn't really one of them. One recent reviewer said they were disappointed because their reservation-only restaurant was only open 3 days a week, and the buffet rarely changed, so much so that guests left the buffet to eat at the pool bar. Wow. Another customer said they felt catfished by their website. That made me laugh because the exterior of the property needed so much work, and when either their room keys or room phones worked, the front desk wasn't much help. And maybe worst of all, they said the pool was gross with bugs swimming around everywhere. And another guest was extremely unhappy with the overall value, citing poor food selection and expensive. They explained they've traveled the world, and this was the first time they've been disappointed, with the food selection being average at best, and they paid top dollar and expected much better quality. So it sits on the southwestern side of St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands in a very isolated location, which normally, as most of you know, I very much embrace an isolated resort. But in this case, since options, especially for dining, are so few and not great, you're kind of stuck. The beach is another big downside, pretty mediocre, and while the pool is a good size, it does get crowded. The two reasons I will say to possibly consider is it's an adults-only all-inclusive. So if you're looking to book adults-only, it's one of the only ones on these islands. And even more importantly, it's the first property on our TripAdvisor list where the service is good and staff is very nice and helpful, which is definitely a big plus. But does that outweigh all the other negatives? That's for you guys to decide. And now to easily one of the most notorious resorts ever, Walla Bavaro. That's Walla with an exclamation point and one word. So the first negative is actually the naming of this resort. But this is one of the most universally criticized resorts ever, with one TripAdvisor review warning, don't stay at this hotel as it's very dated and needs updating. Plus the food was not cooked properly and they became very ill. They also stated that there was false advertising as the pictures shown are nothing like what the property actually looks like. Another reviewer referred to it as a hellhole, stating that it doesn't even deserve 1 star, and also saying it looks nothing like the photos, we're seeing a pattern here, and that the food was bad and gave them, quote, upset tummies. And they also added some pretty gross things about sewage, which I'll spare you from. So this is a dirt cheap budget property. They've never denied that that's what they are, located in downtown Bavaro in the Dominican Republic, 25 minutes from the airport, and the property is actually within walking distance of many bars and dining options, and also a 2-minute walk from the beach. But I think even that distance probably isn't worth it, as the beach is very narrow with a lot of seaweed. And for as much criticism as the staff gets, something that often gets overlooked is that this property attracts a lot of wild, rude, and even aggressive guests, and I think that's an even bigger issue to deal with. Plus, the layout of the property is just very odd. It looks like it used to be 3 separate hotels or apartments, which are all now connected by hallways and alleyways, and it's just all very disjointed. But perhaps worst of all is the 150 rooms. The website states that a full bathroom, and it's spelled wrong, and ceiling fan are amenities, so enough said. And there's no soundproofing at all in these rooms. With all that being said, if you're on the tightest of budgets and are looking for a wild and very lively resort, this might be worth considering. However, if you like even half-decent rooms, food, relaxation, and a good beach, this resort could be your worst nightmare. But the worst of the worst, according to TripAdvisor, is the Grand Oasis Cancun, coming in with a TripAdvisor score of 3.4. And this is another property where you'd have a hard time finding a good review on most sites, definitely not exclusive to TripAdvisor. One guest stated that, quote, "The customer service is non-existent with rude staff, and when they booked a room for their son, upon his late check-in the following day, he learned the room had been given away to another customer." Interestingly, another reviewer said this was their 4th visit, but it would be the last time, as the showers were messed up, the AC was broken, and the rooms smelled like mold. And another guest warned to avoid this resort, stating check-in was a disaster, that keeps happening, and that they waited 2 hours and the staff still couldn't locate their reservation. So it's actually located in the middle of the hotel zone of Cancun, 25 minutes from the airport, and it's hard to miss the giant pyramid that houses 1,200 rooms. It's just massive. And I'm not sure if it's the size of the place that they can't keep up with or what, but the whole property, from the rooms to the common areas, is in serious need of updating and maintenance. It just all looks worn out, the pool gets very overcrowded and wild, the dining always has lines and then doesn't sit well when you finally eat it, and don't even bother complaining about any of this because the staff basically has a "you get what you pay for" attitude. So is this resort for anyone at all? Believe it or not, maybe. They keep getting guests and are able to stay open, so it obviously appeals to some. We just saw a reviewer who visited several times and claimed to have a few great stays. So I'll say, if you're again on a very tight budget but don't want to compromise on location, there's no question this property is very conveniently located, especially if you'd like to do a lot of off-site exploring. And it also appeals to a younger party crowd, so if that's your scene, you'd probably love it. But would I personally recommend it? No, definitely not. Sorry. So I hope you enjoyed this bit of a different style of video, and if you'd like to see similar videos using other sites and their reviews, or any new type of review you'd like to see, please let me know. And for more reviews, tips, and a peek into our travels, be sure to check out my Passport Pages travel Instagram, and I hope to see you all very soon. Bye guys.